Can't you see he doesn't want help? All he wants you to do is tell him what to do and then let him do it all by himself. Now you go and apologize.
Wait a minute, I'm the boss here. Don't give me any orders.
Shh. Behind the laughter and groundbreaking Latino representation of Chico and the Man lies a treasure trove of shocking secrets, strange coincidences, and bizarre behind-the-scenes stories that most fans never knew existed. From stolen comedy concepts and lowrider legends to a working title so offensive it had to be scrapped, tragic ironies, and an inflatable entertainer who tried to save a dying show, this beloved 70s sitcom had far more drama off-screen than on. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Chico and the Man. Fact 1. The show was originally called Spick and Span.
I don't see any resemblance to you.
No, neither do I, Tomas.
I'm Chico.
Before Chico and the Man became the title we all know today, the show had a very different and extremely controversial working title that would never have made it to air in any era. The original name that producer James Comack and his team came up with was Spick and Span, which might sound innocent at first until you understand what they actually meant by it. According to the producers, the title was supposed to be a clever play on words, with Spick referring to the young Latino character Chico and Span, representing the generational age span between the two main characters, the elderly Ed Brown and the young Chico Rodriguez. The problem was that Spick is a deeply offensive ethnic slur used against Latino people, particularly young Latino boys and men, and it had been used as a hateful term for decades. When NBC executives saw the proposed title, they immediately put their foot down and demanded that it be changed before the show could move forward. The network understood that no matter what the intended meaning behind the wordplay was supposed to be, using a racial slur in the title of a television show would be completely unacceptable and would spark massive outrage from Latino communities and advocacy groups across the country. This was 1974, a time when television was starting to address racial and cultural issues more openly through shows like All in the Family and Sanford and Son. But even in that context, putting a slur right in the title crossed a line that the network simply would not allow. The rejection of the Spick and Span title was actually a blessing in disguise because it forced the creative team to come up with something better. They eventually settled on Chico and the Man, which was much simpler, more respectful, and actually captured the essence of the show's central relationship without relying on offensive language. The new title emphasized the two main characters and their unlikely friendship rather than drawing attention to ethnic differences through crude language, and it helped the show become the groundbreaking success that introduced millions of Americans to Latino culture and characters in a positive light. Fact 2. It was basically stolen from Cheech and Chong.
You're overheating. This kid is just blown a gasket.
The origins of Chico and the Man are rooted in what might be one of Hollywood's most brazen cases of creative borrowing, as producer James Comack essentially lifted the entire concept from comedy duo Cheech and Chong without their permission. According to Tommy Chong's 2009 autobiography, Comack followed the comedians on tour for 3 months during the early 1970s, closely studying their most popular comedy sketches, particularly routines called The Old Man in the Park and Pedro and Man. These sketches featured the exact same dynamic that would later become the foundation of the sitcom, a clash between an older white character and a young Chicano character navigating cultural differences through humor. What makes this story even stranger is that Comack didn't even try to hide what he was doing. After observing their act night after night, he approached Cheech Marine and Tommy Chong directly and offered them the starring roles in a television series based on their own material. The duo turned him down flat because they had bigger ambitions than television at the time, preferring to focus on feature films where they felt they had more creative control and better opportunities. Comack wasn't deterred by their rejection and simply moved forward with the concept anyway, changing just enough details to avoid any legal complications. The original pitch Comac developed was supposed to feature a young Chicano character and a young Asian American character, likely inspired by Chong's Chinese heritage. However, when NBC executives got involved and suggested casting someone like Jack Albertson for the older role, Comac transformed the Asian American character into an elderly white garage owner named Ed Brown. Years later, Tommy Chong acknowledged in interviews that Comac had openly admitted to him that the show was based on their comedy routines, though no legal action was ever taken. The show's working title, Spick and Span, even referenced both the Latino character and the generational span between the two leads, though that title was quickly abandoned for being offensive. Fact 3. Jack Albertson hated the pilot script.
No, that means quiet. Now he's going to tell us.
When producer James Comac approached Jack Albertson about starring in a new sitcom called Chico and the Man, the veteran actor had every reason to be selective about his next project. Albertson was riding an incredible wave of success in the early 1970s, having just won both a Tony Award and an Academy Award for playing the same character, John Cleary, in The Subject Was Roses on Broadway, and then in the film adaptation. He had also delivered memorable performances in major Hollywood films like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and The Poseidon Adventure, cementing his reputation as one of the most respected character actors in the business. So when Comac handed him the pilot script for this new show about a cranky garage owner and a young Chicano mechanic, Albertson was less than impressed. In fact, he thought the script was terrible and didn't see much potential in the material at all. Despite his serious reservations about the quality of the writing, Albertson made the surprising decision to sign on for the series anyway, and his reasoning was refreshingly simple. He trusted James Comac completely based on the producer's track record of success with previous television shows, particularly The Courtship of Eddie's Father, which had been both a critical and commercial hit. Albertson believed that even if the pilot script wasn't great, Comac had the skills and vision to develop the show into something worthwhile over time. This leap of faith turned out to be one of the best decisions of Albertson's career, as the chemistry between him and Freddie Prinze became the heart of the show and helped overcome whatever weaknesses existed in those early scripts. The gamble paid off tremendously when Chico and the Man became a top 10 hit, and Albertson went on to win an Emmy Award in 1976 for his portrayal of Ed Brown, proving that sometimes trusting the right people matters more than trusting the material itself. Fact 4. Jose Feliciano wrote 2 theme songs by accident.
Chico, don't be discouraged.
When Jose Feliciano was approached to write the theme song for Chico and the Man, he was already a major star with hit songs like his cover of Light My Fire and the Christmas classic Feliz Navidad. But that didn't stop him from worrying that the producers might reject his work. The blind Puerto Rican singer and guitarist had never written a television theme song before, and he was genuinely anxious about whether his composition would be good enough for this groundbreaking new sitcom about a Mexican-American garage mechanic and his cantankerous older boss. Rather than taking a chance with just one song, Feliciano decided to hedge his bets by composing 2 completely different theme songs, figuring that if the producers didn't like the first one, he could offer them the second as a backup option, and at least one of them might work. What Feliciano didn't expect was that producer James Comac and the network executives would fall in love with both compositions. Instead of choosing between the 2 songs or asking Feliciano to pick his favorite, the producers came up with a creative solution that had never really been done before on television. They decided to use both theme songs in every single episode. The first song, which became the more famous of the 2, played over the opening credits as viewers watched scenes of East Los Angeles and the iconic Gypsy Rose lowrider cruising down the street. Then, at the end of each episode, The second theme song would play as the closing credits rolled, giving the show a unique musical bookend that set it apart from other sitcoms of the era. This accidental decision turned out to be a brilliant stroke of luck, as both songs became deeply associated with the show and helped establish its warm, hopeful tone. Feliciano's dual themes were so beloved that he even received an Emmy nomination in 1975 for Outstanding Achievement in Special Musical Material for his work on the series, and he later appeared on the show itself as Chico's cousin, Pepe Fernando, a womanizing singer who performed the theme song on camera in one memorable episode. Fact 5. The most famous lowrider ever starred in the opening.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and.
If you watch the opening credits of Chico and the Man closely, you'll spot something cruising down the streets of East Los Angeles that became far more famous than most people realize. A candy pink 1964 Chevrolet Impala lowrider known as the Gypsy Rose. This car wasn't just any background prop or random vehicle the producers found for filming, but rather one of the most legendary lowriders ever built, and its brief appearance in the show's opening sequence helped thrust lowrider culture into the national spotlight during the mid-1970s. The Gypsy Rose was created by Jesse Valadez, who was a co-founder of the Imperial's Car Club in East Los Angeles, and the car made its public debut at the 1968 Winter Nationals Rod and Custom Show in Pomona, California. The Impala featured an extravagant paint job done by customizing legend Walt Prey, with over 100 hand-painted roses adorning the body in pink, red, and white colors that made it absolutely impossible to miss. The interior was even more elaborate, with crushed velvet seats in red and bright pink, real chandeliers with working light bulbs, and even a cocktail bar inside the car. When Chico and the Man needed footage of the East LA barrio for their opening credits, the producers filmed the Gypsy Rose cruising down Whittier Boulevard, which was considered the spiritual home and epicenter of the lowrider movement at that time. The car appears for just a few seconds in the opening sequence, but those brief moments of screen time helped introduce millions of American television viewers to lowrider culture and made the Gypsy Rose instantly recognizable across the country. The car's fame continued to grow over the decades, and in 2017, the Gypsy Rose became the very first lowrider ever to be inducted into the National Historic Vehicle Register, an honor that recognizes automobiles of exceptional historical significance. Today, the car is housed in the Peterson Automotive Museum in Los Angeles, where it remains one of the most iconic and celebrated lowriders in automotive history, proving that sometimes a few seconds of television footage can create a legacy that lasts for generations. Fact 6. Freddie Prinze changed his catchphrase due to racism complaints.
Okay, you're not missing anything. Who wants to hear about a girl in a see-through blouse who looks like a Playboy centerfold?
When Chico and the Man first premiered in September of 1974, Freddie Prinze brought one of his most popular stand-up comedy bits directly to the small screen, and it was a catchphrase that had been getting huge laughs in nightclubs across the country. Whenever Ed Brown would ask Chico to do something around the garage, Prinze would respond with an exaggerated accent saying, "That's not my job," which was a routine he had perfected during his comedy performances, and audiences absolutely loved it. The line became an instant hit with viewers in the show's first season, and Prinze delivered it with perfect comic timing that made it one of the most recognizable catchphrases on television at the time. But not everyone was laughing. Hispanic advocacy groups quickly began raising concerns that the catchphrase was reinforcing negative stereotypes about Latino workers being lazy or unwilling to do their jobs, and they argued that this kind of portrayal was harmful to the Mexican-American community that the show was supposed to be representing in a positive light. The criticism grew louder as the show's popularity increased, with protesters even picketing outside NBC's Burbank, California headquarters, demanding that the network make changes to how Hispanic characters were being portrayed on the series. The complaints put pressure on the producers and network executives to address the issue, especially since Chico and the Man was being celebrated as groundbreaking representation for Latinos on primetime television. By the time Season 2 rolled around, the decision was made to retire the controversial catchphrase completely. Prince switched to using "looking good" as his new signature line, which became even more popular than the original and didn't carry any of the problematic cultural baggage that had surrounded "That's not my job." The new catchphrase was upbeat, positive, and optimistic, perfectly capturing Chico's enthusiastic personality without playing into any negative stereotypes about Hispanic workers. "Looking Good" became so successful that it even inspired a comedy album title for Prince and remained his most famous catchphrase for the rest of his tragically short career. Fact 7. Freddie Prinze was actually German and Puerto Rican, not Hungarian.
Wow, boy, small world. And you say you were engaged to this Maria Esteban?
Yes and no.
Yes and no?
One of the most amusing aspects of Freddie Prinze's comedy persona was his claim to be what he called Hungarican, a blend of Hungarian and Puerto Rican heritage that became a signature part of his stand-up routine. He would frequently joke about this unusual ethnic combination during his performances, using it as material for his comedy act and making it part of his public identity. The problem was that this entire Hungarian heritage was completely made up, and Prince knew it the whole time. In reality, Freddie Prinze was born Frederick Karl Prutzel, and his actual ancestry was half Puerto Rican on his mother's side and half German on his father's side. His father, Edward Karl Prutzel, was a German Lutheran immigrant who had arrived in the United States as a young man back in 1934, and there was no Hungarian blood in the family whatsoever. According to Prince's friend, comedian David Brenner, the reason Freddie changed his heritage for his comedy act was purely practical. He originally wanted to be known as the King of Comedy, but since comedian Alan King already had that last name and title, Prinze decided he would become the Prince of Comedy instead, which is why he legally changed his surname from Prutzel to Prince. The fake Hungarian heritage apparently added an extra layer of exotic appeal to his comedic persona and gave him unique material to work with on stage. What makes this even more bizarre is that the writers of Chico and the Man actually incorporated Prince's fictional Hungarian ancestry into the show itself, even though they knew it wasn't real. Throughout the series, Chico's character would reference his mixed background, telling people he was Mexican on his father's side and Puerto Rican on his mother's side, and then adding with a knowing wink that his grandmother spoke a little Hungarian. The show even created storylines where Chico had supposedly spent part of his childhood in Hungary after his mother died, being raised by his Aunt Connie. The producers essentially turned Prince's stage fabrication into official character canon, creating an entire fictional backstory based on a heritage that never existed in the first place. Fact 8. The final episode, Prince filmed, had a chilling, ironic title.
What a beautiful ark! 50 cubits wide by 30 cubits high. And Noah said, "That's my wife you're looking at. The ark's over there."
The final hours of Freddie Prinze's life are haunted by a deeply unsettling coincidence that still sends chills down the spines of those who know the story. On January 27, 1977, Prince arrived at the studio to tape an episode of Chico and the Man titled Ed Talks to God, and the irony of that title would become tragically apparent within hours. The episode centered around Ed Brown's surprise birthday party, where Chico convinces one of Ed's old war buddies to impersonate the voice of God to lift the old man's spirits. In one particularly eerie scene that was filmed that day, Prince's character Chico actually picks up a large knife and makes a comic gesture about stabbing himself to death as an exaggerated apology to Ed, complete with dramatic self-recrimination. Viewers who watched the episode after learning of Prince's death found the scene almost impossible to sit through, knowing what would happen just hours after it was filmed. According to accounts from people who were on set that day, Prince seemed off during the taping, with his timing noticeably affected and his usual energy dampened by whatever demons he was wrestling with internally. The production wrapped late that night, and Prince left the studio for the last time. In the early morning hours of January 28, 1977, after making frantic phone calls to his estranged wife, his psychiatrist, and several friends, Freddie Prinze fatally shot himself in the head while his business manager Marvin Snyder watched in horror, having arrived too late to stop him. The 22-year-old comedian was taken off life support and died the following day. The episode Ed Talks to God eventually aired on March 4, 1977, more than a month after Prince's death, making it a devastating final appearance for fans who had grown to love the young star. The fact that his character spent his last filmed moments joking about self-harm while literally talking about God remains one of the most chilling and tragic coincidences in television history. Fact 9. Freddie Prinze was only 20 years old when the show started.
The bathtub.
What's it doing here?
Waiting to be installed.
Right next to the pump? Listen, kid, washing their windshields is as far as I go.
When Chico and the Man premiered on September 13, 1974, Freddie Prinze wasn't yet old enough to legally rent a car in most states, but he was already carrying an entire network sitcom on his shoulders as the co-lead. At just 20 years old, Prinze became one of the youngest actors in television history to headline a major primetime series, a fact that made his meteoric rise to stardom even more remarkable, and his eventual tragic death even more heartbreaking. Prince's journey to television stardom happened with lightning speed that would be almost impossible to replicate today. In December of 1973, he made his breakthrough appearance on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, where he became the first young comedian Carson ever invited to sit down for an on-air conversation during a debut appearance. That single appearance changed everything for the young comic who had been grinding away at comedy clubs in New York City, introducing himself to audiences as a Hungarican and perfecting his unique brand of observational humor about his mixed heritage and life in the barrio. Producer James Comack happened to catch that Tonight Show appearance and immediately knew he had found his Chico Rodriguez. Within months, Prince went from performing stand-up in small clubs to signing a deal with NBC and filming a pilot for what would become one of the network's biggest hits. The speed of his ascent was dizzying, and when the show debuted that fall, Prince was still so young that he could barely believe what was happening to him. His youth and inexperience actually worked in his favor on screen, bringing an authentic energy and enthusiasm to the character of Chico that perfectly balanced Jack Albertson's world-weary cynicism. The 20-year age gap between Prince and his 67-year-old co-star wasn't just a casting choice. It became the emotional heart of the show, with Chico's youthful optimism slowly breaking down Ed's hardened exterior week after week. Fact 10. They replaced Chico with a 12-year-old boy.
I picked up the fan belt. You owe me $2.
I'm taking you to the movies tonight. That should even us up.
When Freddie Prinze tragically died in January of 1977, the producers of Chico and the Man faced an impossible decision about whether to continue the show without its beloved star. And after much debate, they decided to press forward with one of the strangest replacement choices in television history. Instead of bringing in another adult actor to play a new mechanic character or simply ending the series as a tribute to Prince, the creative team made the bizarre choice to introduce a 12-year-old Mexican orphan boy named Raul Garcia, played by young actor Gabriel Melgar, who would effectively become the new Chico in everything but name. The introduction of Raul happened in the opening episode of Season 4, and the writers came up with an unusual backstory to explain how this child entered Ed Brown's life. In the episode, Ed and his friend Louie take a fishing trip down to Tijuana, Mexico, and when they return to Los Angeles, they discover that a scrappy young orphan boy has secretly stowed away in the trunk of Ed's car, hoping for a better life in America. Rather than turning the boy over to authorities, the crusty old garage owner's heart softens, and he decides to adopt Raul and give him a home in the garage. The most emotionally resonant moment of Raul's first episode came at the very end, when Ed is putting the young boy to bed and accidentally calls him Chico out of habit, clearly still grieving the loss of his former partner and friend. When Raul gently corrects him and says his name is Raul, not Chico, Ed responds with the poignant line, "You're all Chicos to me," suggesting that any young person who brought energy and hope into his life would carry that same spirit. This touching scene attempted to bridge the gap between the show's past and its uncertain future, though many fans felt that no one, especially not a child, could truly replace the irreplaceable chemistry between Freddie Prinze and Jack Albertson. Fact 11. Charo joined the cast as the boy's aunt.
You should never sneak up behind a woman like that. We females are fragile creatures, and you could end up with a fat lip.
After Freddie Prinze's tragic death in 1977, the producers of Chico and the Man faced an impossible challenge of continuing the show without its beloved star, and their solution led to one of the strangest casting decisions in television history, when they introduced 12-year-old Gabriel Melgar as Raul, a Mexican orphan that Ed Brown adopts. They apparently decided the show needed another element to fill the void left by Prinze's charisma and energy. Their answer was to bring in Charo, the flamboyant Spanish entertainer known for her coochie coochie catchphrase, platinum blonde hair, and guitar performances, to play Raul's overprotective Aunt Charo, who arrives from Spain to become part of the makeshift family. The casting was bizarre on multiple levels because Charo's over-the-top personality and heavily accented English created a completely different comedic dynamic than what the show had established over its first 3 seasons. While the original Chico and Ed relationship had been built on genuine warmth and believable cultural clash between a young Chicano mechanic and a grumpy garage owner, suddenly viewers were watching a Spanish entertainer in sparkly outfits interacting with a grieving old man and a young Mexican boy. Charo appeared in 6 episodes during the show's final season from 1977 to 1978, but her presence couldn't save the declining ratings or replace the chemistry that had made the show special in the first place. The decision to add Charo felt especially desperate because she was already well known as a variety show guest and entertainer rather than a sitcom actress, and her character seemed designed more to inject energy and spectacle into a dying show rather than to serve any meaningful story purpose. Critics and fans alike found the addition jarring, and some television historians have pointed to Charo's casting as an example of networks making increasingly bizarre choices to keep a show alive after losing its core appeal. The show limped through the rest of its 4th season before finally being canceled in July of 1978, with Charo's brief tenure becoming a footnote in the series' troubled final chapter. Fact 12. NBC initially rejected Freddie Prinze.
If you don't, you'll never forgive yourself. You'll knock yourself till the day you die. You'll say, I had the chance to invest in myself, and I did a policeman's exit.
Yeah, I would.
When producer James Comack discovered Freddie Prinze performing on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson in December of 1973, he immediately knew he'd found his Chico Rodriguez, but convincing the network executives at NBC turned out to be a completely different challenge. Despite Comack's absolute insistence that Prinze was perfect for the role, the NBC executives initially rejected the young comedian outright, viewing him as too much of a risk for a lead role in a major network sitcom. Prinze was barely 20 years old at the time, had very limited television experience beyond his stand-up comedy appearances, and was attempting to break into an industry that had never really featured a Latino lead character in a sitcom before, which made the network understandably nervous about betting an entire show on an unknown performer. Comac refused to give up on Prince and pushed hard for the young comedian to at least get a screen test alongside other potential candidates for the role. The network eventually agreed to let Prince audition against two other finalists who were being seriously considered for the part of Chico. During the screen testing process, Prince's natural charisma, comedic timing, and genuine charm completely won over the same executives who had initially dismissed him. He outperformed both of the other finalists so convincingly that NBC had no choice but to offer him the role, despite their earlier reservations about casting such an inexperienced actor in a lead position. What made this rejection even more ironic was that Prince had already been making waves in the comedy world through his appearances on The Tonight Show, where he became the first young comedian Johnny Carson invited to sit down for an on-air conversation during his very first appearance, which was an extremely rare honor that Carson typically reserved only for established performers he genuinely liked. The network's initial hesitation to cast Prince seems almost ridiculous in hindsight, considering he went on to become an overnight sensation when Chico and the Man debuted on September 13, 1974, with the show immediately landing in the top 10 ratings. Fact 13. Jack Albertson became the 8th Triple Crown winner.
Never mind about the bill. What about the phones?
All the phones are out because of the storm.
Jack Albertson's work on Chico and the Man wasn't just another television role for the veteran actor. It was the final piece in one of entertainment's rarest achievements. In 1976, when Albertson won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actor in a comedy series for playing grumpy garage owner Ed Brown, he became only the 8th performer in history to win the Triple Crown of Acting, which means earning a Tony Award, an Academy Award, and an Emmy Award over the course of a career. What makes this accomplishment even more remarkable is that Albertson had won both his Tony and his Oscar for playing the exact same character in different versions of the same story. In 1965, he won the Tony Award for Best Featured Actor in a play for his performance as John Cleary in the Broadway production of The Subject Was Roses, a drama about a troubled family dealing with their son's return from World War II. 3 years later, when the play was adapted into a film in 1968, Albertson reprised his role and won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, making him one of only 11 actors who have won both awards for the same character. By the time Chico and the Man premiered in 1974, Albertson was already riding high on his success from playing Grandpa Joe in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and his memorable role as Manny Rosen in The Poseidon Adventure. His sitcom role as the cantankerous Ed Brown was actually his second Emmy win. He had already taken home an Emmy in 1975 for a guest appearance on the Cher variety show. But it was his 1976 Emmy for Chico and the Man that sealed his place in the record books as a Triple Crown winner. This exclusive club of performers who have achieved all 3 major acting awards remains incredibly small, even today, with only 24 actors ever reaching this milestone, making Albertson's achievement during the show's second season one of the most prestigious accomplishments in the series' history. Fact 14. It was the first American TV show set in a Mexican-American neighborhood.
Yeah.
Oh, hi.
Hi. I got something for you.
I got something for you, too.
Yeah?
Here.
When Chico and the Man premiered on September 13, 1974, it made television history by becoming the very first American TV series to be set in a Mexican-American neighborhood. The show took place in the barrio of East Los Angeles, specifically depicting life in a rundown garage owned by Ed Brown in what was then a predominantly Spanish-speaking section of the city. This groundbreaking setting was a deliberate choice by creator James Comac, who wanted to showcase a vibrant community that had been largely invisible on American television up to that point. The decision to set the show in East LA wasn't just about location. It was about authentically representing a culture and community that mainstream television had essentially ignored. The opening credits alone told the story, featuring real footage of the neighborhood, including cruising lowriders on Whittier Boulevard, local businesses, and the everyday life of the barrio. This wasn't a sanitized Hollywood version of Latino culture. It was an actual glimpse into a thriving Mexican-American community during the 1970s. The show's setting sparked both celebration and controversy. While many Mexican-American viewers were thrilled to finally see their community represented on primetime television, Hispanic advocacy groups initially protested the series. They picketed NBC's Burbank, California headquarters, demanding changes because they felt the show relied too heavily on ethnic stereotypes, particularly in the pilot episode, where Ed Brown used ethnic slurs against Chico. The protesters also pointed out that despite being set in a Mexican-American neighborhood, there were very few other Hispanic characters beyond Chico himself in the early episodes. The producers responded to these concerns by making adjustments to the show, including revealing that Chico was half Mexican and half Puerto Rican with some Hungarian heritage thrown in, and by adding more Latino characters to the supporting cast. This represented television taking its first real steps toward depicting Mexican-American life, even if imperfectly, and paved the way for future shows to feature Latino communities and characters more prominently in American pop culture. Fact 15. An episode. Address Chico's death. A year after Prince died,
That was brilliant. I mean, that muffler transplant you did on a 63 Plymouth using a 48 DeSoto as a donor.
Oh, thanks, kiddo.
nearly a year after Freddie Prinze took his own life in January of 1977, the producers of Chico and the Man finally aired an episode that directly acknowledged what fans already knew, that Chico Rodriguez was dead. The episode, titled Raul Runs Away, was broadcast during the show's fourth and final season and gave viewers the closure they had been desperately seeking since the young star's tragic passing. For months after Prince's death, the show had awkwardly avoided the subject by simply saying Chico was away visiting his father in Mexico. But this emotional installment finally confronted the painful reality head-on. In the episode, 12-year-old Raul, the orphan boy Ed Brown had adopted as a replacement Chico, discovers the original Chico's belongings hidden away in the garage, including his treasured guitar. When Ed catches Raul going through these precious items, something inside the grieving old man snaps completely. In a moment of raw anger and overwhelming sadness, Ed violently smashes Chico's guitar to pieces while berating the frightened boy for touching things that didn't belong to him. The outburst terrifies young Raul so much that he runs away from home, convinced that Ed hates him and doesn't want him around anymore. When Ed eventually tracks down the runaway boy, he sits him down for a difficult conversation and finally explains what happened to the man whose name Raul had inherited. While the show never explicitly stated how Chico died or gave graphic details about his passing, the implication was clear to adult viewers who knew the real-world story. Ed's explanation brought a sense of finality not just to the character of Chico Rodriguez, but also to Jack Albertson himself, who had lost his beloved co-star and friend. The episode served as a form of collective mourning for the cast, crew, and millions of viewers who had watched Freddie Prinze's meteoric rise and devastating fall. After this cathartic moment, only a handful of episodes remained before Chico and the Man ended its run forever in July of 1978.